Start with contracting sprites. Chapter 121, Heading to the Examination Center. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. June 1st. The familiar special transport vehicle stopped in First High's school. Many students had already gathered under the classroom building. Some were wearing First High uniforms, while others were wearing uniforms from other schools. But compared to the second stage examination, there were fewer candidates. Theoretically, even if the results of the first and second stages were poor, they could still participate in the third stage of the combat test. However, other than those who were already prepared to repeat their studies, all the other students at Sprite universities whose grades were clearly hopeless, had given up on the Sprite cultivation examination. Instead, they switched to take the ordinary college entrance examination. Even though they did not put in effort to revise, for it would have been difficult for them to achieve good results for the ordinary college entrance examination anyway. The time to set off was approaching. The teachers of each class held the name list, confirming the candidates who were taking part in the combat test one by one. Almost everyone was here. There was only one person left. Why isn't old Su here yet? Lu Ren looked around. He paced around anxiously. Old Chen, the form teacher, walked over and asked, "Does Su Hao have any other contact details?" Lu Ren shook his head. "I just called his cell phone, it's switched off." "Ms. Chen, if Su Hao doesn't make it in time, wouldn't he? If old Su doesn't manage to attend Whale Island University, who is he going to cozy up to?" Old Chen frowned. "He probably went to arrange an evolution for the water spirit foal." "Don't be anxious. Su Hao knows the time of the combat test. We're just heading there in advance now. Even if he can't make it in time, there are other ways to go." As the most outstanding student in N-City's batch, or even since the establishment of the Sprite stream, the N-City authorities were just waiting for Su Hao to make themselves look good, so they could show him off in front of other cities. No matter what, he wouldn't miss it. Old Chen estimated that the N-City authorities would be able to track Su Hao's train ticket and other records to find the New World area he was in, even if he does not show up the day before the examination. Therefore, there wasn't much of a problem. On the other hand, since the three of you have chosen the advanced examination area, you must be careful. Bear in mind not to advance rashly. The assessment method of the combat test was similar to the joint examination. Beginner entry level, intermediate entry level, advanced entry level. The scores for defeats were different. And the difference was obvious. The combat test encouraged candidates to search for and defeat powerful sprites as much as they could. He chose the intermediate examination area for stability. But there were only very few advanced entry-level students and a small number of intermediate entry-level students in the examination area. It was very difficult to snatch points. The logic was the same as leveling up in a game. The low-level areas were safer, but they had less experience, and had people who fought for monsters. The advanced area required more risk, but as long as he could deal with it, he would definitely gain a lot of experience. All of you have to pay attention to the extremely rare elite level sprites and advanced entry level sprites in the examination area. Try your best to find lone ones to battle against as well. Lu Ren and the other two nodded. A few days. Their main sprites had all reached advanced entry level. This was also why they had the courage to choose the advanced examination area. As they spoke, a batch of candidates and sprites boarded the special transport vehicle, and a few cars slowly left the campus. Those were the candidates heading to the elementary examination area. The examination halls were randomly selected, probably because of forest environments, swamp environments, and so on. There was more than one elementary examination area. "Time's up, time to set off." The dean, Old Gu, got into the car and said, "Ms. Chen, I'll leave the advanced area to you." Old Chen made an okay gesture. Lu Ren called for the lava tortoise and walked towards the black transport vehicle. Suddenly, thud, thud, Thud. Thud. The sound of horse hooves were heard. Lu Ren turned around, but there was no sign of anyone. Look at the sky. There's a flying horse. At this moment, Li Songting shouted. Lu Ren looked over. Under the bright sun, a silhouette was quickly approaching. That's... He raised his hand to block the piercing sunlight, his eyes widening. A warhorse was surrounded by mist. Its scales reflected off the bright sunlight. There were also gushes of cold air on the hooves that could be seen by the naked eye. The warhorse pranced over at light speed, and crystal clear frost appeared everywhere it passed, as if a bridge of frost was connected across the sky. Above the bridge of frost, a red-black crow spread its wings and flew, scattering trails of blaze. Gushes of wind starting blowing. The frost and sparks formed dreamy shadows. Under the light was a figure riding a horse. He was riding his warhorse, which was stepping on air, over. What the f***ck? Old Su. Lu Ren was so shocked that he could only let out the simplest exclamation. The warhorse landed on the ground. The person leaped down, his legs trembling slightly. But his voice was full of energy. Student Su Hao, reporting in. As he sat on the special transport vehicle, Su Hao was glad that he made it in time. Of course, he didn't ride the horse all the way here. It was just after stepping out of the high-speed rail, he then rode the water unicorn beast, half running and half putting on a show while rushing towards the school. He left behind a mysterious legend. Once he got into the car, he immediately borrowed a power bank from Lu Ren. Who allowed? He wanted to swipe on his cell phone. Reverie Butterfly also wanted to play with cell phones. It made the poor cell phone unable to bear the burden. Su Hao was already considering whether he could loan the little rascal some money and let it buy a cell phone by itself. The interest rate could be slightly lower. Su Hao, your horse. Ah, can your horse fly? Lu Ren also had some knowledge. Only the final form of the cloud water dragon horse could step on air. But when he saw that Su Hao was about to speak, he instinctively knew what to say. Talent, I understand. Well cultivated, I understand too. Lu Ren had already learned to compete to answer, what else could Su Hao say? He could only shout 666 and give him a like. Apart from the driver and old Chen, there were only Su Hao and the other 3 candidates in the car. There were only 4 people in An City who chose the advanced examination area. The topic of their discussion was naturally the upcoming combat examination. According to the current intel, well, Gu Linjiao looked at her spring sprite. What intel do you have, Lingling? Spring Sprite covered its face with both hands. It has it too difficult. Hum. Oh yes, she said. Our examination area is on an isolated island. Apart from forests and mountains, there are also roads, bridges, abandoned factories, residential areas, and other topographic environments. So what do you think? She looked at Li Songting. Li Songting and the ascetic dog bumped fists. It was pointless to ask. She then looked towards Lu Ren. Lu Ren was leaning against the lava tortoise, his words were filled with phrases like fuck, control it, get up. She then looked towards Su Hao. Su Hao thought about it seriously for a while and probed, charge forward. Gu Linjiao was speechless. The special transport vehicle drove on the highway, while the scenery on both sides moved backward rapidly. Their destination was a small town by the sea. That was where all the candidates from the advanced area are set off from. They would take the transport plane there and then be placed all over the isolated island. On the way, when Su Hao heard that the marks for the written test were out, he scrolled through using his cell phone with its full bar signal and found his grades. How much? Lu Ren extended his neck and asked. Well, Su Hao looked at the grades of each subject, probably 21 marks. He added, that's the total number of points deducted from all subjects. Lu Ren. Li Songting was rendered speechless. The former straight-A student, Gu Linjiao, was rendered speechless. After a series of clocks, several cars arrived at their destination. The car door opened slowly. Fresh air filled the car. Old Chen shouted, "Everyone, get off!" Chapter 122, Heavenly King Yan. Bay Town. Rows of plain, low-rise houses stood in place. The landscape was beautiful, and one could easily see the rise and falls of the tides as they gaze over. A slightly salty sea breeze blew over. With a bit of decoration, it would be a tourist town that could attract visitors from everywhere. Few people usually make their way around this area. But today, black special transport trucks stopped one after another, and many young, tender-looking boys and girls alighted from them. With their sprites, giant squid, rumbling pig, superpower gibbon, armored elephant, water-treading snail, flaming pig, plague locust, thorny turtle, etc. The cultivation level of every sprite was visibly more outstanding compared to their own kind. At this moment, there were still 2 days until the start of the third stage of the assessment. Regardless of whether the students here were mid-level or top-level excellent, none of them dared to let loose, and were seizing every last minute to train their sprites, cooperating with them so they could. The students who came here, whether they were mid-level, outstanding or top-level, didn't dare to relax. They took the last moments to train their sprites and cooperate with them, so they could master their sprite commandeering hand signs more skillfully. Lin Mingzheng brought his 2 sprites, a hare devil spirit and a golden roaring lion, to the town's training field. Suddenly, his sidekick caught up with him. "Boss, another school is here." Lin Mingzheng frowned. What did that have to do with him? Then, he heard, "It's an city, an city's Suhao is here." He stopped in his tracks, turned around swiftly, and walked towards the entrance of the town. His demon spirit puppet sank into its memories. It couldn't help but shiver. After hesitating for a moment, it still chased after him. On the side of the street, a candidate thought for a moment and asked his classmate, "Who is an city's Suhao?" "I don't know." "Isn't an city a small city?" "Our neighbor, Zikao City, is about the same size as an city, but it doesn't seem like anyone there dared to apply for the advanced examination area, right?" Both of them shook their heads. Suhao from an city was probably a candidate that person knew. They hadn't heard of him. They didn't care at all. Suddenly, a candidate wearing the same uniform as the person just now came over. "You guys don't even know an city's Suhao and Big Boss Su." The candidate who spoke shook his head, with the expression that they were not worthy of participating in their third stage of the assessment, for they did not know who Big Boss Su was. One of them sneered when he heard that. "It's not like he's some big shot, do we have to know him? I dare to choose the advanced examination area because I'm not afraid of any competitors. Even if it's Feng Liangke, who is very famous in our Tianese province, we'll only know after we compete with him, let alone what Suhao, who came out of nowhere." He raised his chin slightly, with the arrogance of a genius. And a spirit that wouldn't admit defeat easily no matter who his opponent was. Sai, the top student from First High, shook his head in disappointment. "Seems like you really don't know Big Boss Su." He walked towards the entrance of the town. His gaze lowered, as if he was lost in memory. "Big Boss Suhao doesn't have any special achievements either. It's just that he blew up the machine during the power test a few days ago. It exploded." "It exploded." The lingering sound reverberated and gradually disappeared amidst the crashing waves. The 2 candidates slowly turned their heads and looked at each other, with stiff expressions. They couldn't conceal the feeling of, "What the heck? Exploded the machine? Was this human?" He got out of the car. Suhao wanted to spur his horse to sprint. In an era where other candidates could only rely on their legs to walk, riding a horse himself would make him look like the coolest boy on the street. Unfortunately, he looked at the size of the water unicorn beast. At the moment, he hadn't even mastered an elegant move to get onto the horse yet. For the time being, I won't act cool anymore. He looked around. His gaze landed briefly on the extraordinary sprites. He recorded the data and glanced at the next sprite. Should I continue selling intelligence? No, forget it. The college entrance examination was a solemn and formal event, so Su Hao didn't dare to play any tricks. Most importantly, during the joint examination, he wasn't confident enough and needed some tactics. But now, he felt just a little more confident. To crush others. Let's go. Su Hao walked towards the accommodation arranged for them by the officials. Each person was given a small courtyard. It wasn't very comfortable, but the place was spacious enough. Roar! A white-striped tiger ran past them, bringing with it a gust of wind that messed up his hair. Su Hao took a peek. There was someone sitting on the wind-patterned tiger. He was wearing a school uniform and looked like a candidate. A strong rider on a tiger. Su Hao couldn't stand it. Someone was acting cool in front of him. Looks like I can only strip this wind-patterned tiger naked, humph. He turned around and gave Lu Ren a look that said, quickly write it down in your little notebook. Bay Town was originally a military base. There was an airport and a command center. In the command center building, the higher UPS of the province, the examiners team, the inspection team, and other big shots were gathered here. When they saw the new generation brimming with youthful energy, they couldn't help but smile. This batch is the most outstanding geniuses of our Tianese province this year. Their standards are even higher than last year. It's only right. The province has allocated so much funding, and technology is also improving. These are the results that we deserve to have. At this point, the third stage of the examination had yet to begin. The topics the big shots were talking about weren't limited to the college entrance examination either. There was also quite a lot of confidential information that ordinary sprite trainers couldn't understand. I heard that terrorists are becoming increasingly active overseas. A small country's capital was attacked. Those lunatics. Traitors. A big boss of the inspection team asked, Tianese province was attacked by terrorists only last year, is there extra security this year? Especially for this batch of geniuses. Supervisor Chen, don't worry. The special transport vehicle used to pick up candidates can withstand high-intensity attacks. The drivers of each transport vehicle are not only skilled in driving, they are also able to dodge sudden oncoming danger, for they themselves are experienced elites. We also formed a special support team, made up of 5 sprite trainers with flying sprites. The team leader is at master level, enough to provide assistance to various places in a short period of time. In addition, there are patrolling warriors and sprite trainers around all the examination halls 24 hours a day. Keep your guard up. This is the first year since we joined the combat test. The TV will live stream the assessment process. No mistakes can be made. A loud sound was heard. The person approaching had a very eye-catching shiny bald head. He walked with vigor. Seeing him was like seeing a ball of burning fire. The big shots with extraordinary statuses in the hall immediately paid their respects. Heavenly King Yan. President Xia. The president of the provincial guild, Heavenly King Yan, Xia Yanghua, looked around and said, during the assessment, I will station here. He looked out the window. He couldn't wait for someone ignorant to bump into him. A broadcasting station car drove over slowly and stopped at the entrance of the town. A few people alighted from the car. A female reporter dressed in professional attire was walking at the front. She had exquisite makeup on and was holding on to a microphone. She walked towards the sprite trainers guarding the entrance of the town, but didn't dare to get too close. Several huge ground wolves with terrifying auras were lying there. She spoke from more than 10 meters away. Hello, we are from Tianese TV station. We are here to interview the college entrance examination candidates. The sprite trainer, who was standing upright, asked expressionlessly, "Do you have any identification documents?" "Yes, yes." The female reporter and the other television station personnel took out the relevant documents. After checking for a while, he let them in. They walked into the town and walked around the streets a few times, but didn't see a single candidate. She couldn't help but fall into deep thought. Where is he? Chapter 123, Opening. Sister G, where are the best candidates in our province? Why can't we even see Sprites? In the town. They only saw ground wolf, mountain moving ape, leaf blade warrior, and other Sprites. They were all following alongside the solemn-looking Sprite trainers in black battle suits. Just looking at them made the novice assistant shiver a little. The female reporter, Ji Nanking, had done her homework, despite not being able to obtain much information in advance. "Come on, let's go find out the location of the training hall." The town's training hall didn't look grand, but the facilities inside were very well equipped and advanced. The power testing machine alone was better than the one used for the second stage of the assessment, and could better withstand the attacks of elite-level Sprites. When they came in, they saw Sprites training their unique skills. But not many. Ji Nanking saw an ascetic dog continuously punching at a sandbag-shaped equipment while making rumbling sounds. Her eyes lit up. She approached for an interview. "Hello, student, I can interview." "No, I'm not free. I reject it." Li Songting shot her a glance and rejected coldly. He also found a punching bag himself, and began to throw punches without even looking at the exquisite-looking female reporter. Women were just hindrances. He. Ji Nanking glanced at the other candidates in the training hall. 10 minutes later. He. She calmed herself down from the urge to hit someone, took a deep breath, put on a professional smile, and stood in front of the camera. "Ladies and gentlemen, I am currently at the combat preparation area for the college entrance examination. Before me are the most outstanding, genius Sprite trainers who stood out from more than 10,000 other Sprite trainers." The camera took a wide-angle shot at the perfect timing. One can see that they are extremely hard-working just from the tiny details. Not only are the Sprites training, they are training themselves, which is the reason why they are able to be where they are today. With that, the female reporter took a deep breath. "Let's go, I don't believe that we can't find a single candidate to interview." In the town. Su Hao sat on a seat by the shore. Beside him was a few bottles of drinks he had bought. They weren't training for their lives like the others. Well, not that they weren't, exactly. Reverie Butterfly was using its psychic power to control a cell phone, while a few bottles of beverages hung in mid-air. He reached for a bottle. Gurgle. The little rascal glanced at it and withdrew the psychic power wrapped around the drink. The other beverages were still hanging steadily. Through the glass bottle, one could see that the fat otaku water inside didn't shake at all. At first glance, it looked like he was practicing psychic power. In fact, he was practicing spiritual force control. Su Hao took a sip of fat otaku water. He felt that it was not cold enough. It tasted a little off. He looked at the water unicorn beast. After staring at it for a long while, he had no choice but to say, reduce the temperature. The water unicorn beast that had successfully evolved in cold water lake didn't have the ice properties, but it could bring a bit of cold air with it. Not strong. But it was enough to use as an air conditioner. Su Hao didn't sweat much the whole day. The water unicorn beast was very happy to be able to show off its value again. It opened its mouth slightly and took a deep breath. Puff. Cold air could be seen with the naked eye. Su Hao froze suddenly. His hand that was holding the drink bottle couldn't help but tremble, and his teeth made clicking sounds. His eyes were filled with hostility. He let out the anger of a Sprite trainer. The water unicorn beast took 2 steps back. Horseface didn't understand. He couldn't help but look at Reverie Butterfly. Neva? Nay. Gurgle. Reverie Butterfly flew onto the head of the stupid horse and enjoyed the air conditioning. And told it was doing the right thing. It was just that this sprite trainer was not good at expressing himself. Su Hao had just recovered from the cold. Just as he was about to teach the water unicorn beast what the dignity of a sprite trainer was, he saw a few people walking over. People weren't important. The important thing was that there was a camera. Cough. Su Hao, who had just stood up, conveniently neatened his clothes. Unfortunately, it was the school uniform. "Hello, can I interview you?" Ji Nanking asked. At the same time, her eyes indicated for the cameraman to quickly film the sprite. Even if they couldn't interview the sprites, it would not have been a loss. 3 sprites. She could already tell that this candidate in front of her was the big boss among the candidates. She was also prepared to be coldly rejected. Then they heard. "All right." The female reporter's good professionalism allowed her to suppress her joy and maintain a calm expression. Just as she was about to ask the interview questions, she saw the candidate pull the sprite in front of him. "This is my main sprite. If you have any questions you want to interview, you can ask it." Gurgle. Reverie Butterfly waved its little hand, expressing that it was greeting the fans behind the TV. The female reporter's mouth twitched. She thought this was a candidate who could be interviewed. But she had to maintain her professionalism, and could only patiently ask 2 conventional questions. She received gurgle, gurgle, gurgle as her answers. At this point, Su Hao had already walked away. He had returned to the small courtyard in his accommodation. Then, Lu Ren ran over and waved the cell phone in his hand. "Old Su, look what I got. Rare intel." He turned on his cell phone. Several videos were played. In the videos, Thorny Turtle and Vines were dancing in the air. There was a winged dragon with a wingspan of 4 to 5 meters and lightning wrapped around its whole body, flying in the sky. Thunder rumbled. There were also sprites 3 to 4 meters long that looked like giant yellow lizards. On its back was a slightly darker miniature pyramid. Including the tower on its back, the sprite was more than 2 meters tall. It looked like a terrifying giant creature. This is the Back Tower Dragon. The Back Tower Dragon was the evolved form of the Earth Mound Dragon, while its final evolved form, the 9-level Tower Dragon, had monarch-level potential. As long as it was cultivated well, it would be a sprite not inferior to those of the Fiery Bird pathway. "That's right," Lu Ren said. "The sprite trainer of the Back Tower Dragon is called Yu Zhang. He's a young boy, probably 14 to 15 years old at most, but he's definitely your competitor this time." There's also the sprite trainer of the lightning-winged dragon, called Feng Liang Ke, who also possesses a large threat. They were evaluated as 2 of the 3 most competitive candidates in the advanced area. "Where's the other one?" Su Hao asked. After asking for half a second, it dawned on him. "So it's me. It's reasonable, reasonable, and reasonable." As he spoke, he suddenly thought of something. "That's not right, you can't attack each other in the combat test, why are you collecting intelligence?" "Habit, cough, habit. I'll feel uncomfortable all over if I don't scout for information for a day." Su Hao thought about it. It was indeed like Lu Ren to do so. "But how did you secretly take these videos? You didn't get beaten to death." If any other candidates dared to secretly take videos of him, well, he had to see if it was a girl first. Then, he would see if she was pretty. It wasn't impossible to forgive someone who could score above 90 marks. Lu Ren chuckled. "That requires stealth. Isn't there a reporter interviewing? I only gave her 5 minutes for an interview. In exchange, I asked them for some footage of the shoot. It's a win-win." Su Hao was rendered speechless. "You are really a clever fatty." But that interview team was too miserable. 2 days later. Early in the morning. At dawn. A horn beeped. Su Hao and the other candidates changed into the special battle clothes distributed by the examination hall, brought their sprites and went to the designated gathering point. A muscular man, whose style was similar to Coach Xiang's with a strong back and a strong waist, strode over to them. He swept his gaze across, paused, and said straight to the point. You all understand the rules of the combat test, so I won't say much here. The assessment will be held in 2 days. There will be a live broadcast. I hope you can show the best battle stance of your sprites to the audience in the country. Now, bring your backpack and wristband and board the transport plane. When you step onto the isolated island, the combat test will begin. Chapter 124, Surprise Attack Team. Su Hao looked over. They were at the airport. Not far away, 5 large transport planes were parked. Just by looking at its size, one could tell that this kind of transport plane could even transport giants like the lava dragon turtle. It was more than enough to carry a group of entry-level sprites, for even the one with the largest physique was only a back tower dragon. The stocky-built instructor read out names one by one. The candidates who were called picked up their backpacks, called out to their sprites, and boarded the designated transport plane. Su Hao boarded the 3rd transport plane. He was separated from Lu Ren and Gu Linjiao. This was intentional. They did not allow the candidates to help each other. The transport plane was very spacious. Su Hao found a seat and sat down. There was also a deck here where sprites could be fixed down. Gurgle. Reverie Butterfly resisted. It flew to the top of Su Hao's head. Squawk. The flaming cloud crow originally wanted to follow, but the top of Su Hao's head couldn't accommodate it, so it could only squat silently at the corner. There was enough space in the cabin for the water unicorn beast, but it was immediately scared and frozen by a very fierce-looking giant armored crab within the cabin. It instinctively chose to retreat to Su Hao's side. On the account that it could provide air conditioning, Su Hao temporarily forgave it. But that giant armored crab is actually extraordinary. It made him feel like being extraordinary was becoming less and less valuable. After him, candidates walked up one by one and each found a seat to sit down. Silence. It was just that from time to time, gazes sized each other up and down. Most of them were looking at him. Bang bang. A huge figure walked over. It attracted a lot of attention again. It was the back tower dragon. And his sprite trainer, Yu Zhang. Yu Zhang also brought another sprite, Gargoyle, with him. It was also at advanced entry-level standard. Su Hao looked over. Yu Zhang was indeed as Lu Ren had said in the intelligence report. He was a fair and clean boy, not very old, and looked very easy to bully. But the 2 sprites beside him were each more ferocious than the other. When Su Hao looked over, Yu Zhang happened to look over too. Then, he saw a slight blush appear on his shy face. He quickly lowered his head again. Su Hao was rendered speechless. Why are you blushing? Everyone is here. Sit tight and prepare to set off. The sprite trainer of the giant armored crab spoke from within the cabin. The cabin door slowly closed, accompanied by a buzzing sound and a downward pressure. The transport plane had taken off. In the cabin, the shape of the island was displayed on the huge screen. It looked like a piece of pancake that had been chewed off at one corner. Pancake. Tiny dots were marked on the outskirts of the island. That was their drop-off point. The distance between each point was very far. Even if the rule of not attacking each other was excluded, it would have been very difficult to interfere with each other when more than 100 people were thrown onto such a large island. But it's impossible for the examiner's team to arrange for a simple assessment. Su Hao thought. The examiners definitely were aware of the general information about their sprites. Since it was difficult for candidates to interfere with each other, they could only enhance the strength of wild sprites. Although he was optimistic, he also remained cautious. On the way, it was still the sprites who couldn't stand the boredom and broke the silence in the cabin. They started chattering again. Su Hao heard that Reverie Butterfly seemed to be instilling some kind of self-reliance and self-improving spirit into other sprites. The back tower dragon stared with its bell-sized eyes, making deep growls from time to time. Su Hao could hear excitement from its growls. Your sprite knows so much. Yu Zhong looked at him with admiration. When he saw him looking over, he lowered his head again. Su Hao was rendered speechless. He thought about it and asked, by the way, why aren't you wearing your school uniform? Could it be that the power behind this boy was too strong? Yu Zhong said, because I didn't go to high school. I didn't go to elementary school or middle school either. My family arranged teachers and classes for me. When they saw that I had already completed the basic classes, passed the battle assessment from my guiding teacher, and also passed the sprite cultivator assessment, they signed me up for the college entrance examination. Su Hao was rendered speechless. If he remembered correctly, Yu Zhong seemed to be 14 years old, and that was only his nominal age. Yet, he had already achieved so much. How did Lu Ren and the other scums live? He himself couldn't help but be amazed as well. Perhaps, this is what a real genius is, completely different from hard-working people like me. It was the first time the college entrance examination was added to the combat test. All the TV channels had already begun promoting it long ago, be it Tianese satellite TV or other satellite channels. There was going to be a 2-day live combat test. Of course, calling it a live stream certainly meant there would be some delay, hence selective broadcasting. That was enough for the audience everywhere to look forward to. Sprites, sprite trainers, battles. For most ordinary families, they were too far away. Usually, there would be mostly performances or competitions on TV and on the internet. One would only be able to see sprites battling in real life at the high school league. But the combat test was different from the high school league. 8 a.m. It was the start of the broadcast. Early in the morning, many viewers were already waiting in front of their televisions. Most people in Tianese paid attention to their own province's college entrance examination. After the advertisement, finally, the program started. The two sprites' energy balls collided, exploding into a ball of bright flames. Amidst the flames, the words Tianese Province Combat Examination appeared. The curtains were lifted. The camera panned from a high angle. The camera slowly zoomed in, displaying the view of the examination hall buildings. In the elementary and intermediate examination areas, candidates had already entered the venue one after another, carefully exploring the complicated terrains with their sprites. When someone bumped into wild sprites, battles would start hurriedly. Each candidate used their own method. Flames, vines, earth thorns, and other unique skills were used, making viewers filled with excitement. From time to time, some reporters would interrupt the program with the examination candidates' interviews. They were all very positive. Many students who had yet to reach contract age clamored, wanting to choose the sprite stream during their third year of high school. In Bay Town, Lao Chen and the other teachers from the various schools were also arranged to be seated in a hall to watch the battle through surveillance cameras, as well as footage taken from high-altitude drones. What's that? A teacher pointed at the scene captured outside the island and said, "Why is there a speedboat with people on it?" "Those are the people from the surprise attack team." A sprite trainer from the examiner's team said, "In the advanced area assessment, we added sprite trainers who will be launching surprise attacks on candidates. The reason why it wasn't announced in advance was to test whether these outstanding students are able to deal with sudden situations calmly." Examiner Wang, may I ask what level the sprite trainers of the surprise attack team are at? They each have an elite level sprite. Seeing that the expressions of many teachers present had changed, Examiner Wang smiled and said, "But the members of the surprise attack team won't use their full strength. As long as the candidates don't panic, they will be able to escape from the attack team members. It's mainly to test the candidates' ability to react on the spot." The surprise attack team will only officially enter after half a day. However, he had also expressed in his voice that if the candidate's adaptability was too poor and panicked in the face of danger, then, they might also be eliminated by the members of the surprise attack team. The high school teachers weren't so clear. However, Examiner Wang knew that the three big terrorist organizations were becoming increasingly rampant. Addition of the surprise attack team was meant as a form of prevention. When these students were attacked by terrorists, they would have experience and be able to deal with it calmly. PS1. Don't say that something bad always happens to the protagonist. It's just that our vision is fixed on the protagonist. In this world, terrorist organizations are not weak either. In the end, I can't possibly write it that way. After all, how can the protagonist act cool in front of a heavenly king? Perhaps there's something wrong with the setting of my context in the previous chapters, but don't think too one-sidedly. PS2. Important notice. The release date is set. Next Friday, which is, the 7th of February. This lousy author is working hard to save the drafts. After it is published, well, it will increase by a little. Chapter 125, Snatching Points. At the edge of the island, Su Hao stood on solid ground. The transport plane had already flown away. He looked at the forest before him. For the time being, no sprites had been discovered. He opened his backpack and took a look inside. These food can last 2 days if I eat sparingly. But to be sparing was impossible. The combat test requires physical work. How could one have the energy to do so if they weren't full? According to the details for the combat test, there may be food and other supplies in some buildings on the island. For instance, tissues, which Su Hao felt would come in very handy. And could not go without them. Unlike during the joint examination, where the supplies were all placed within the eye-catching tower. Where exactly were the supplies on this island? They could only search bit by bit. In any case, let's check it out first. Su Hao walked forward. After a few steps, he then remembered that he was someone with a mount. He waved at the water unicorn beast and squatted down directly without having to show any intentional gaze. The water unicorn beast nodded with a neigh, putting its hooves forward and did a half squat down. For some reason, it looked like a dog. Cough. Su Hao hurriedly shook off the random thought in his mind. It was cool to ride a horse, but riding a dog. He leaped onto the horse and straddled it. It was cold. It was a little cold. It might not be comfortable after sitting for too long. Su Hao considered. He had to match it with a saddle, with a thicker and fluffier cushion. He commanded the water unicorn beast to walk towards the forest. Su Hao didn't let it fly. It could step on air, but not for long. If there was no need, Su Hao would try his best to conserve the physical strength of the water unicorn beast. Flaming Cloud Crow, fly higher and scout for buildings and wild sprites. Squawk. The flaming cloud crow nodded and spread its wings, flying off. On the other hand, Reverie Butterfly laid on top of Su Hao's head and released its perception. It looked around warily. Little Water's battle power was limited. If wild sprites really appeared, Su Hao would still have to depend on himself for his own safety. Coo. Flaming Cloud Crow flew in the air. It noticed that the area of the forest below wasn't that big. Not far ahead was an abandoned road. There were some scrapped vehicles stacked there. It also saw sprites. An entry-level stone monster. Sprites like the stone monsters have their heads, torsos, and limbs made up of large rocks. It looked short and fat. But in fact, it was nearly 2 meters tall, just that it was very wide. This stone monster was very curious about the scrapped car. It raised its arm and punched it, producing banging sounds. The stone monster immediately retreated warily. He hid behind another scrapped car. This is a stupid stone monster. Flaming Cloud Crow thought for 4 to 5 seconds before coming to a conclusion. It then turned to look around. Apart from the stone monsters, there were also a few entry-level sprites. They weren't near. Further away, he could vaguely see the outline of the building. And then? Flaming Cloud Crow thought hard. Thinking what would Big Sister have done? It thought for another 40 to 50 seconds. At this moment, the stone monster on the ground discovered it and let out a warning growl. Flaming Cloud Crow thought it was not a good sign. Wouldn't it be terrible if he got discovered while his master had sent him to investigate? It thought for a moment. No conclusion came to mind. But it plunged instinctively. Its black wings spread. A faint red light appeared. The stone monster roared and grabbed the surrounding gravel, hurling parts of the scrapped vehicle over. Only to see a black shadow flash past. The next moment, pain traveled from his lower body. The stone monster's vision turned black, and it fainted. Bang! In the forest. The water unicorn beast wasn't slow. It would either leap over the obstacles blocking its way, or spit out water and blast itself away. Su Hao's legs dangled in the air as he hugged the water unicorn beast's neck. Although the riding posture was not the nicest, it was safe and steady. This is a sprite trainer. I used to climb mountains on foot. That's really not human work. But why hasn't Flaming Cloud Crow returned after so long? Didn't I just ask it to investigate quickly? In other words, there was a contractual connection. He could vaguely sense the state of the sprite. It wanted Su Hao to know that the Flaming Cloud Crow didn't die. It wasn't until they got out of the forest and everything became clear before his eyes that Su Hao saw a small dot flying over from the horizon. Squawk! Squawk! Flaming Cloud Crow was asking for credit. It had already completed its mission perfectly. Yes, in the northwest direction, there are buildings that look like chimneys. Buildings can also vaguely be seen in the northeast direction. Wait, you also dealt with a few sprites that interfered with your investigation. Su Hao sank into deep thought. Here came the problem. How exactly did a few sprites who couldn't fly and lacked ability to launch long-range attacks, interfere with Flaming Cloud Crows which could fly so quickly? Squawk! The Flaming Cloud Crow landed on his hand. It was a little heavy. Su Hao waved his hand and let it fly elsewhere to rest. He commanded the water unicorn beast to set off. An earth wolf appeared in his vision. It's only intermediate entry level, I'm pretty lucky. When the earth wolf saw the three sprites, it immediately turned and escaped without hesitation. It was very fast. The grayish-brown figure ran more than 20 meters away in a flash. However, an emerald green energy ball arrived first and launched with accuracy. With a boom, the earth wolf was sent flying a few meters away by the explosion. It fell to the ground with a whimper. Search! Su Hao poked Reverie Butterfly. Gurgle! The little rascal reluctantly agreed. Its psychic powers transformed into a palm, flipping the earth wolf's body back and forth. Finally, it found a mark embedded on the earth wolf's body. It picked up the spoils of war and floated over. Mid-level badge. Su Hao put it into the bag. There were also several entry-level badges inside. There weren't many surveillance cameras on the island. The way to tally the scores was by collecting the badges he got from wild sprites after defeating them. So, although there were many sprites, but one would not be able to score for attacking belatedly. The candidates didn't dare to take their own sweet time. If they wanted to get high scores, they had to fight and snatch for them. Especially in the elementary and intermediate examination areas, there were even more people. The competition was intense. Candidates who possessed advanced entry-level or close to advanced level sprites basically all chose the advanced examination area. According to the current discovery, the closer to the center of the island, the higher the level of the sprite is. Su Hao guessed. The examiner's team had specially arranged things to be this way. This allowed the weaker candidates to avoid elite-level sprites to a certain extent. But sprites were living creatures. They could move on their own. If he was unlucky and bumped into one. My luck is pretty good. On the other side, on the roof of an abandoned building, a few superpower gibbons discovered them. They jumped down while yelling. They smashed onto the already cracked road, causing the ground to make cracking noises as it started sinking. The superpower gibbons were very cooperative with one another, surrounding Su Hao and his 3 sprites. 2 advanced entry level, 3 intermediate entry level. Su Hao looked at them, and his smile widened gradually. A minute later. Boom! The flaming cloud crow stepped on a fallen superpower gibbon. Its wings were like blades on the neck of another superpower gibbon. Reverie Butterfly sent one flying with a ball. It was playing happily with the other 2. At this moment, a figure rushed out from the corner of the street. 2 sprites followed beside him. A 2-headed hound. A flaming bat. They were all spitting flames. Aggression filled the air. Who snatched my prey? The candidate who had just used the flaming bat to scout and discovered the prey with high marks quickly rushed over and roared. As long as the badge wasn't taken away, they could still snatch it. He approached it quickly. Suddenly, he found the figure in the distance a little familiar. At this moment, boom! Boom! 2 explosive noises were heard. 2 basketball-sized energy balls blasted out, causing smoke and dust to fill the sky. Amidst the dust and smoke, the superpower gibbon's 2-meter-tall body was sent flying, landing heavily on the ground. One of them even landed not far from him. The candidate glanced at it. He swallowed his saliva and took a few steps back cautiously. Nings, it's Nings. I'm just a passerby.